From the beginning, I saw and I think was deeply impressed by the element of the archaic as a kind of shaping sensibility in her work, and it would be a pan-cultural archaic. It would involve both pre-Columbian and Central American and Mexican motifs. Now the trick I think in sculpture is the work shouldn't feel like leftovers, something like just brought back from salvage, but it must have some kind of existent animating spirit, either still in it or found in it, a residue in the course of ruination. And I think that really gets to what is so vital in Ruth's work. Sculptures and the ensemble installations are alive, they're active, they're activated. And I think the installation in this wonderful survey is very careful to give pieces room, partly because I think, not just because they're shown off to best effect because of the lighting, but because of that principle of activation that exists inside them. Spaces here at Mana Contemporary are very grand, they're Dia-like, and you have lighting and space options that smaller spaces just don't have. So Sunny was able to install work in different states of lighting. So the innate theatricality of the work be brought forward. So you have rooms of shelves where the smaller pieces might be on shelves, or many smaller pieces might be on shelves in a kind of dim light, and you have a feeling of going into a Mithraic temple or going underground in some Chinese archaeological site, I come away with a sense of holistic practice that's always evolving. So, yes, it's spiritual, but everybody reacts like there's a difficulty there, which is to sentimentalize something. There's a physicality here that's unsentimental, and a roughness that's unsentimental, even as there's an elegance that suggests aesthetic conciseness, concision.
It's a wonderful mix in Ruth of found materials that are left in their raw and native state, and an understanding of concrete, plaster, which are traditional or modern materials for sculpture, but how they can, in a way, transcend their neutrality. When she has objects that are very specific and generic at the same time. She uses materials that are neutral and yet take on a kind of almost poetic specificity with her handling of them. So that, in particular, that interaction of found carton with poured concrete or plaster, it's a real intersection of highly generalized, very personalized, art historical, artistic, craft-oriented, and post-industrial, banal, quotidian. And there's a sort of a happy marriage, sort of a shameless kind of flowing into each other of these contrasts. I think there's a tendency to think of Ruth as a multidisciplinary artist and to think of the works as being installations. And both of those are true in themselves, but we don't want to lose track of the way in which each individual piece is really a fully considered sculpture in the round. And these are not props that come into being when put into an installation. These are sculptures that lend themselves to installation. And I think that Sunny Qiu has done an exquisite job, quite rightly, not worrying too much about chronology or even themes, but simply allowing each space to represent as best it can bodies of work, but really just showcasing the sculptural vivacity of Ruth Hardinger's vision?
At the time that she did her first sculptures where the concrete was shaped by encasing cardboard and then the cardboard was pulled away, I noticed this quality right away, and we were casting about, or she was casting about for a name for these sculptures, which, you know, are very figural in their, you know, with all their references to cubic and minimalist form, that in their sag and in their flex, you know, once the cardboard is pulled away, they're awake in some way, and they seem to have a kind of salutary presence. I was just moved to suggest the title Envoys for them, and that became the name of the group of work.
Ruth is very much a product of the period in which she came into her own as an artist in the early 1980s, late 1970s. Process art was still very much the rage, post-minimal systems art, but you could really strongly sense from the get-go a much more, first of all, a fascination with classicism and with geometry and with order, a sense of the harmonious within the universe, an almost mystical, occult vision of geometry, and then increasingly this kind of personal metaphysics of transforming the commonplace into something that connects with states of being, maybe a more prehistoric outlook on symbols and symbology. But at the same time, and this is all making her sound like a very kind of mystical artist, but her work also constantly intersects with her activism. Her acute sense of crisis, of communities struggling for their independence and their identity, her really deep affinity with peasant craftspeople in Mexico, for instance, and also her activism as a feminist and as an environmentalist and an ecologist. All this kind of flows into the work. So you get this really rather compelling mix of a sort of shaman, outsider, sort of visionary on the one hand, and a deeply rooted, concerned citizen and artist on the other.
And as one walks through this exhibition, something else I think about is it's the string, it's the rope, it's the cement, and how it occupies space. The totality of space, there's something that's called positive space, negative space. I reject the term negative space because most people think about the space as being empty, voidless. But this space that surrounds all of us and all of these objects in this exhibition is full of energy. It's a field, and it's a field of forceful gravitas. Ruth deals with that, the totality of space in its total. In Chinese Zen Buddhism, there's something that's called living movement. And living movement describes the fact that all things in the world have an energy. It has a life force. But I think Ruth in some ways really transcends that because of the depth and the breadth of her personal ways of thinking about her position in the world. And there is, to my sense, a deeply felt spiritual equation that's here. There's a monolithic quality to these things, and that's part of the gravitas.